My name is Rachel Carter, and I was 36 years old when my father died. 3 months later, I stood in his lawyer's office and watched my 3 brothers divide the business Dad had spent 42 years building. There was one problem. My name wasn't on the list. My oldest brother, Daniel, was getting the company itself. My brother Michael was getting the warehouse and equipment. My youngest brother, Jason, was getting Dad's second location and the delivery fleet. And me? I was getting a small box of my father's personal belongings. Inside were his old watch, 2 photographs, and a handwritten note that simply said, "For Rachel." I stared at the list in front of me. Then I looked at my brothers. Daniel leaned back in his chair like the meeting was already over. Michael was scrolling through his phone. Jason kept tapping his fingers against the table. Nobody looked at me. I finally turned toward the attorney. "Mr. Harris, I think there's been a mistake." He didn't answer immediately. "Welcome to a new video. I hope you'll enjoy the story. Share your city name from where you are watching me in the comments section. Thanks. Now let's get back to the story." He slowly removed his glasses. "I thought you might say that." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" Before he could answer, Daniel interrupted. "Rachel, Dad made his decision." I looked at him. "His decision?" Daniel nodded. "He wanted the business to stay with the people who actually worked in it." That sentence hurt more than I expected. Because I had worked there too. For 12 years. Not in the warehouse. Not driving trucks. Not sitting in the executive office. I had worked behind the scenes. I handled payroll when the company was struggling. I organized Dad's tax records. I negotiated with insurance companies. I built the spreadsheet that finally showed us where the business was losing money. And during the worst year of Dad's life, when the company almost went under, I was the one who found the mistake that saved it. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. Michael finally looked up from his phone. "Come on, Rachel. You knew Dad wanted the boys to take over." "No," I said quietly. "I knew Dad wanted the business to survive." Jason laughed under his breath. "Same thing." I looked at the 3 of them. 3 brothers. 3 sons. 3 new owners of everything our father had spent his life building. And 1 daughter sitting across from them with a box of photographs. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "There's something else." Daniel frowned. "Something else?" The attorney opened a folder. "Yes." He pulled out a document. Then another. Then another. My brothers stopped talking. Mr. Harris looked directly at me. "Rachel, your father left very specific instructions regarding you." Daniel leaned forward. "What kind of instructions?" The lawyer didn't answer him. He looked at me instead. "Your father told me that if your brothers received control of the company, I was to contact you personally." I stared at him. "Why?" He reached into the folder and removed a sealed envelope. "Your father gave me this 6 months before he died." My hands suddenly felt cold. "What's inside?" He pushed the envelope toward me. "I was told not to give it to you until after the transfer of the business was complete." Daniel immediately stood. "Wait." Mr. Harris looked at him. "This is private." Daniel's face hardened. "I'm her brother. And I'm her attorney." Silence filled the room. I picked up the envelope. My father's handwriting was on the front. "Rachel, open this only after your brothers believe they have one." I stopped breathing for a second. Jason looked at Michael. Michael looked at Daniel. And Daniel stared at me. For the first time that afternoon, none of my brothers looked confident. I slowly broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. I unfolded it. The first line made my eyes fill with tears. "Rachel, if you're reading this, then your brothers have finally taken everything they thought they were entitled to. I looked up at Mr. Harris. Did Dad know this would happen? The lawyer nodded. He was afraid it would. My voice shook. Then why didn't he stop them? Mr. Harris leaned back in his chair. Because your father didn't want to stop them. He paused. He wanted them to show you exactly who they were. I looked down at the letter again. And that was when I realized something. My father hadn't forgotten me. He had been preparing for this moment long before I knew it was coming. And whatever was inside that letter was only the beginning. I read the first sentence again. Rachel, if you're reading this, then your brothers have finally taken everything they thought they were entitled to. My hands were shaking. I kept reading. I know this will hurt you. I know you'll wonder why I allowed it. But I needed you to understand something your brothers never learned. A business can be divided on paper. A family cannot be repaired that easily. I swallowed hard. Daniel was still standing. Dad wrote that before he died, he asked. Mr. Harris nodded. 6 months ago. Daniel's face changed. Then this is ridiculous. Dad was sick. Mr. Harris looked at him calmly. Your father was ill. He was not confused. Michael leaned toward the table. What exactly did he leave Rachel? Mr. Harris closed the folder. That is between Rachel and me. Jason shook his head. This is crazy. I didn't say anything. I kept reading. For 12 years, Rachel has done work for this company that nobody noticed because she never asked to be thanked. She fixed problems before they became emergencies. She protected the company's money. She protected my reputation. Most importantly, she protected her brothers. My eyes filled with tears. I thought about all those nights. The unpaid invoices. The payroll reports. The insurance renewals. The phone calls with suppliers. The Saturdays I spent in Dad's office while my brothers were somewhere else. I had never thought of those things as sacrifices. Dad had. The next paragraph made my heart stop. But I also know what your brothers have done behind my back. I looked up. Daniel was watching me. What does it say? I folded the letter slightly. Nothing you need to know. He laughed. Rachel, this is about our father's business. I looked at him. Apparently it was also about me. Daniel sat down again. Mr. Harris remained silent. I continued reading. You may believe your brothers received the business today. Technically, they did. But they did not receive everything. I frowned. What did that mean? I read the next line. There is a difference between owning a company and owning what makes that company valuable. My heart began beating faster. Dad's company was called Carter Industrial Supply. It wasn't a huge corporation. But it had been successful for decades. We supplied equipment and industrial materials to construction companies throughout the state. The company owned 2 warehouses. A fleet of 12 delivery trucks. Several pieces of expensive equipment. And, more importantly, hundreds of long-term contracts. Those contracts were what made the business valuable. I looked at Mr. Harris. What did Dad mean by that? He folded his hands. Your father created several legal documents before his death. What kind? Some concern ownership. Others concern the company's contracts and intellectual property. I stared at him. Intellectual property? He nodded. Your father's customer database. Pricing system. Supplier agreements. Internal software. Several proprietary processes he developed over the years. Daniel suddenly stood again. That's company property. Mr. Harris looked at him. Some of it is. The room went completely quiet. I looked at my brothers. Daniel's confidence was disappearing. Michael stopped tapping his fingers. Jason finally put his phone away. I asked the lawyer the question that had been sitting in my mind. If they own the company, how can they not own those things? Mr. Harris gave me a careful look. Because your father didn't transfer everything to the company. I felt a chill run through me. Then where did he put it? Mr. Harris opened another folder. That's what we need to discuss. Daniel immediately said, we should all be here. Mr. Harris shook his head. No. He looked directly at me. Your father specifically instructed me to explain this to Rachel first. Daniel's jaw tightened. Why her? Mr. Harris answered quietly. Because she is the person he trusted to decide what happens next. I couldn't speak. For 12 years, I had believed my father saw me as the daughter who helped whenever he needed me. I never imagined he saw me as the person who might one day have to save what he built. Mr. Harris slid another document across the table. This is a copy of an agreement your father signed 3 months before his death. I looked at the first page. Then I saw the name. Rachel Carter. My breath caught. What is this? Mr. Harris pointed to the signature line. Your father transferred certain assets into a separate holding company. I looked at him. Whose holding company? He paused. Yours. I stared at the document. For several seconds, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. My father had created a company in my name. And apparently, my 3 brothers had just taken control of the business without realizing that some of its most valuable assets weren't theirs at all. But then Mr. Harris said something that changed everything. There is one more document. He opened the folder. And Rachel, this one explains why your father waited until after his death to tell you. Mr. Harris placed the final document on the table. For a few seconds, I didn't touch it. I was afraid of what I might find. My father's name was printed across the bottom of the first page. Thomas Carter. My father. The man who had spent his entire life building Carter Industrial Supply. The man whose 3 sons had just walked out of this office believing the company belonged to them. And somehow, before he died, he had created something that put me at the center of everything. I looked at Mr. Harris. What does this document say? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the conference room door. Daniel noticed. What are you looking at? Nothing, Mr. Harris said. Daniel narrowed his eyes. You keep saying this is confidential, but we're talking about the same business. Mr. Harris calmly closed the folder. Daniel, your father was very specific about who could be present during this conversation. Daniel's face hardened. I'm his son. So am I, Michael added. Jason stood behind them. And we're all shareholders now. Mr. Harris looked at each of them. Not according to every document your father signed. The room went silent. Daniel took one step forward. What does that mean? Mr. Harris didn't answer. He looked at me instead. Rachel, your father knew this conversation would eventually happen. I felt my stomach tighten. He knew my brothers would take the company. He suspected they would. I stared at him. Why? Mr. Harris sighed. Because your father had been watching them for years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Watching them do what? Mr. Harris opened the folder again. Spending company money they weren't authorized to spend. My mouth went dry. Daniel immediately laughed. That's absurd. Michael looked at him. Daniel. But Daniel shook his head. Dad gave us access to the accounts. We were running the business. Mr. Harris nodded. You were. Then he added. That doesn't mean you were entitled to everything you took. Daniel's expression changed. I looked between them. What did they take? Mr. Harris slid another page toward me. It was a financial summary. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the numbers. Large payments. Repeated payments. Transfers from Carter Industrial Supply to companies I had never heard of. $18,400. $27,650. $41,200. Then another. $36,000. My eyes moved down the page. There were dozens. I looked at Michael. What are these? He didn't answer. Jason looked away. Daniel finally spoke. Business expenses. To companies I don't recognize? They were contractors. For what? Daniel's jaw tightened. Various projects. I looked back at Mr. Harris. Are these legitimate? He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He simply said. Your father didn't believe they were. My hands went cold. Then why didn't he stop them? He was already sick. Mr. Harris paused. And he was trying to find out how far it went before confronting anyone. I looked at the financial statement again. Suddenly, memories came rushing back. Dad is sitting alone in his office late at night. Dad asked me questions about invoices. Dad told me not to worry when I asked if something was wrong. Dad became unusually quiet whenever Daniel discussed expanding the business. I had assumed he was tired. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he had been afraid. I looked at Daniel. Did Dad know about these payments? Daniel crossed his arms. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain them. I don't have to explain anything to you. Something inside me changed. For years, that sentence would have hurt me. Now it made me angry. You don't have to explain it to me, I said quietly. Maybe you'll have to explain it to the people who signed the contracts. Daniel stared at me. Mr. Harris gave me a small nod. Then he pulled out another document. This is the reason your father created the holding company. I looked down. The company name was printed at the top. Carter Family Holdings, LLC. Underneath it was my name. Rachel Carter, Managing Member. My heart started pounding. Why me? Mr. Harris answered carefully. Because your father believed you were the only one who would protect the assets instead of using them for yourself. I shook my head. I don't understand. You don't have to understand everything tonight. He pushed the document closer. But you need to understand one thing. I looked at him. The company your brothers received is not the entire business your father built. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. Mr. Harris didn't flinch. No. Daniel stared at him. Mr. Harris continued. Your father anticipated this exact reaction. He reached into the folder and removed a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting. For Rachel. Open only after my death. I recognized his handwriting immediately. The same handwriting that had filled birthday cards. The same handwriting that had written notes beside my school lunches. The same handwriting that I had once written, I'm proud of you. My eyes filled with tears. I reached for the envelope. Daniel stepped closer. Rachel, don't. I looked at him. Why? He didn't answer. For the first time since we had entered the lawyer's office, I saw something I had never seen on my oldest brother's face. Fear. Not anger. Not frustration. Fear. I looked at Michael. He was pale. Jason had stopped moving completely. They all knew something. Something I didn't do. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten page. I unfolded it. The first line made my chest tighten. Rachel, if your brothers are standing in the same room when you read this, then you already know they took control of the company. I looked up. My 3 brothers were staring at me. I continued. Do not argue with them. Do not accuse them. And above all, do not tell them what is inside this letter. My heart began racing. I kept reading. They believe the business is theirs because they have always confused access with ownership. I swallowed. Then I reached the sentence that changed everything. The contracts, warehouses, equipment, and company systems are only part of what I protected. I turned the page. There was another paragraph. There is one asset your brothers cannot sell, transfer, borrow against, or control. I stared at the words. My fingers tightened around the paper. Then I read the final sentence. Rachel, that asset is the reason I chose you. I looked at Mr. Harris. What asset? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached beneath the table and placed a small black key in front of me. I stared at it. What is this? Your father left it with me. What does it open? Mr. Harris looked directly into my eyes. The second warehouse. My heart stopped. The warehouse on Mercer Street? He nodded. I shook my head. But that warehouse belongs to Carter Industrial Supply. Not anymore. I looked at my brothers. Daniel's face had gone completely white. Michael whispered something I couldn't hear. Jason took a step backward. I looked down at the key again. For 12 years, I had believed my brothers were the ones Dad had trusted to inherit his business. Now I was beginning to understand something much more frightening. My father hadn't simply left me something. He had hidden something from them. And whatever was inside that warehouse. My father had been protecting it until the day he died. I closed my hand around the key. Then Mr. Harris said, Rachel, before you go there, there's something you need to know. I looked up. Your father wasn't the only person who knew about that warehouse. He paused. Someone else has been inside it recently. My blood ran cold. Who? Mr. Harris looked toward my brothers. Then he said, We don't know yet. But the look on Daniel's face told me one thing. Someone did know. And suddenly, I wasn't sure my father's secret had been safe at all. I kept staring at the black key in my palm. It was small. Old. Nothing about it looked important. But my father had left it with his lawyer and specifically told him to give it to me after his death. And now I couldn't stop thinking about one question. What had Dad been hiding inside the Mercer Street warehouse? Daniel stood across the conference table. We're not going anywhere until we know what's happening. Mr. Harris looked at him. You've already received the documents transferring control of Carter Industrial Supply. Daniel frowned. Then why are we still discussing assets belonging to the company? Because not every asset belongs to the company. Daniel's face tightened. You keep saying that. Because it's true. I slipped the key into my pocket. Daniel noticed. Give me that. I looked at him. No. His eyebrows rose. Rachel. You heard the lawyer. I heard a lot of things that don't make sense. I stood. Then maybe you should start asking yourself why Dad didn't trust you with them. The room went silent. Daniel's expression hardened. But before he could answer, Mr. Harris stood. Rachel, I strongly recommend that you don't go to the warehouse alone. Why? Because if someone has already been inside, we don't know what they were looking for. I looked at the key. What could they be looking for? Mr. Harris hesitated. Your father never told me everything. Then what did he tell you? He told me the warehouse contained records that could become extremely important if there was ever a dispute over the company. I stared at him. What kind of records? Original contracts. Supplier agreements. Financial documents. Some of your father's private business records. I felt my stomach tighten. And he put all of that under my name? Not exactly. Mr. Harris opened another folder. He placed the ownership of the warehouse into Carter Family Holdings. My eyes widened. The entire warehouse? Yes. Then why didn't I know about it? Because your father didn't want anyone to know. I looked at my brothers. Daniel was staring at the lawyer. Michael had gone unusually quiet. Jason looked like he wanted to leave. I suddenly understood why. They weren't confused. They were worried. I turned toward the door. I'm going. Daniel immediately followed. I'm coming with you. No. Rachel, this is still family business. I stopped. For 12 years, whenever Dad needed something done, I handled it. I looked directly at him. You didn't call it family business then. Daniel's face reddened. That's not fair. Neither was dividing everything without telling me. He had no answer. I walked out. Mr. Harris followed me into the hallway. Rachel. I turned. He handed me a second envelope. Your father told me to give you this only after you saw the warehouse. I stared at him. There's another letter? Yes. What's in it? He shook his head. I don't know. I looked at the envelope. Then at the key. Then back at him. Why would Dad make me go through all of this? Mr. Harris gave me a tired smile. Because your father knew you would ask questions. And? He wanted you to find the answers yourself. The Mercer Street warehouse was 20 minutes from the lawyer's office. I drove alone. I kept the key on the passenger seat. For most of the drive, I couldn't stop thinking about my father. When I was 17, Dad had taken me to that warehouse once. I remembered it clearly. I had been helping him organize old invoices. He had stopped near the back wall and told me something I didn't understand at the time. Never throw away an original document. I laughed. Why? Because someday, someone will tell you the copy is good enough. He smiled. And sometimes, it isn't. I had forgotten that conversation. Until now. When I reached Mercer Street, I parked across from the warehouse. The building looked exactly as I remembered it. Gray brick. Large metal doors. A faded Carter Industrial Supply sign above the entrance. But something was different. The lock had been replaced. I got out of the car. My heart started pounding. Someone had been here. Recently. I walked toward the door. The new lock wasn't damaged. It had been installed professionally. I took the black key from my pocket. There was a second lock underneath the new one. An old brass lock. The key fit perfectly. I turned it. Click. The door opened. The smell hit me first. Dust. Old cardboard. Machine oil. And something else. Paper. Thousands of boxes were stacked along the walls. I turned on the lights. Only half of them worked. I stepped inside. For several seconds, I just stood there. Then I noticed something. The warehouse wasn't abandoned. Someone had been using it. There were fresh footprints in the dust. They led toward the back. I followed them. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it. At the end of the warehouse was a small office. Dad's old office. The same wooden desk. The same filing cabinet. The same green lamp he had used for years. I walked inside. There was a photograph on the desk. My father. Me. Daniel. Michael. Jason. We were standing outside the original Carter Industrial Supply building. I picked up the photograph. Dad had written something on the back. Family is what you protect when nobody is watching. My eyes filled with tears. Then I noticed something underneath the photograph. A small metal box. It had no lock. I opened it. Inside were several flash drives. A thick envelope. And a handwritten notebook. I picked up the notebook. The first page had one sentence. If Rachel is reading this, then the truth has finally become necessary. I sat down. My hands were shaking. I opened the next page. There were dates, names, amounts, and besides several entries, my brother's initials. I turned to another page. Then another. The deeper I went, the worse it became. Payments had been made from company accounts. Some were legitimate. Others weren't. There were transfers to companies that didn't appear in Carter Industrial Supply's normal records. One name appeared repeatedly. Westbridge Logistics. I didn't recognize it. Then I saw the amount. $82,000. Another transfer. $64,500. Then $117,000. My breathing became shallow. I flipped through the pages faster. There were dozens of transactions. And next to some of them, Dad had written, "Ask Daniel. Ask Michael. Do not confront yet." Then I found one entry that made my blood run cold. $243,700, missing. Underneath it, Dad had written, "They think I don't know." I stared at those words. My brothers had taken control of the company that morning. But Dad had been investigating them long before he died. Suddenly, I understood why he had created Carter Family Holdings. He wasn't simply protecting assets. He was protecting evidence. I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of contracts. But these weren't ordinary contracts. They showed that several major Carter Industrial Supply customers had signed agreements directly with Carter Family Holdings, LLC. My name was listed as the managing member. I couldn't believe it. Dad had quietly moved some of the company's most valuable relationships into the holding company. Not the warehouses. Not just the equipment. The customer contracts. The relationships that actually kept the business alive. Then I found one final document. It was dated 3 months before Dad died. The title read, "Notice of Irregular Financial Activity." I read the first paragraph. Then the second. My hands went numb. Dad had written that he suspected company funds were being diverted through outside vendors. But there was something even more disturbing. He had identified the person who first discovered the problem. It wasn't him. It wasn't me. It was someone who worked inside the company. Someone who had apparently tried to warn him. I read the name. Linda Morris. Our senior accountant. I knew Linda. She had worked for Dad for almost 15 years. She had always been quiet. Professional. Reliable. I turned the page. At the bottom, Dad had written, "Linda knows the truth. If anything happens to me, find her before they do." I froze. Before they do. Who was they? My brothers? Someone else? I reached for the phone. Then I heard something outside the office. A metallic sound. I stopped breathing. Someone was inside the warehouse. I slowly stood. The footsteps came closer. One step. Then another. I grabbed the notebook and slipped it inside my bag. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. I didn't move. A shadow appeared beneath the door. Someone was standing there. Then the handle began to turn. I stepped backward. The door opened. And I saw the face of the person I least expected to find there. It was Michael. My brother. He looked at me. Then at the open metal box. His face changed. "Rachel." I couldn't speak. He closed the door behind him. Then he whispered something that made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't have come here." I stared at him. "Why?" Michael looked toward the warehouse entrance. Then back at me. "Because Daniel isn't the one you need to worry about." I felt my heart stop. "Then who?" Michael swallowed hard. I don't know how much Dad told you. He didn't tell me anything. Michael looked at the notebook in my hand. Then you need to leave. Why? He stepped closer. Because the person who has been taking money from the company. He stopped. His eyes filled with fear. Then he said, he's not working alone. And before I could ask another question, the warehouse lights suddenly went out. The warehouse went completely dark. I couldn't see Michael anymore. For one terrible second, I couldn't even hear him. Then I heard his voice. Don't move. I froze. What happened? Someone cut the power. My heart started pounding. You said someone was here. I said don't move. I heard Michael take a step toward me. Then something crashed somewhere in the warehouse. A metal shelf rattled. I jumped. Michael grabbed my arm. Stay behind me. I hated how frightened I felt. This was my father's warehouse. My family's business. And somehow, I felt like a stranger inside it. Michael pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The narrow beam moved across the office. Nothing. Then we heard another sound. Footsteps. This time they were moving away from us. Michael looked at me. We need to go. I grabbed the notebook. What about the documents? Take them. I stuffed the papers into my bag. Michael opened the office door slowly. The flashlight moved across the warehouse. There was nobody there. We walked toward the entrance. Then Michael stopped. Wait. What? He pointed at the floor. There were footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. They led toward the rear exit. Michael's face went pale. He came in through here. Who? I don't know. Michael, you keep saying that. He looked at me. Because I don't know. I could hear the anger rising in my voice. Then tell me what you do know. He looked toward the rear door. Not here. We hurried outside. The moment we reached my car, Michael stopped me. Don't drive home. I stared at him. What? If someone was watching the warehouse, they may know your car. I looked around the street. Nothing moved. But suddenly every parked vehicle looked suspicious. Where are we going? Somewhere private. I shook my head. No. You're going to tell me everything right now. Michael looked exhausted. Then he nodded. Fine. We got into my car. He sat in the passenger seat. For almost a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Did you steal money from Dad's company? Michael looked down. No. Then why are your initials in Dad's notebook? He closed his eyes. Because I knew something was wrong. How long? Almost 2 years. I stared at him. 2 years? He nodded. Dad started asking questions about the company accounts after he noticed payments going to outside vendors. Westbridge Logistics. His eyes widened. You saw that name? Yes. He leaned back. Then you know more than I thought. Tell me. Michael took a breath. Westbridge wasn't a real supplier. My stomach dropped. What? It existed on paper. It had a bank account. It had invoices. But the company didn't actually provide the services we were paying for. Who owned it? Michael looked at me. I don't know. You're lying. I'm not. Then what did you know? He rubbed his forehead. I knew someone inside the company was creating fake invoices. Who? I never found out. I thought about Dad's notebook. Then why did he write your initials? Because he asked me to investigate. I stared at him. You were helping Dad? Michael nodded. But Daniel didn't know. What about Jason? Michael shook his head. He didn't know either. I sat silently. For the first time since Dad died, one of my brothers wasn't defending himself. He was scared. Why didn't you tell me? Michael looked at me. Because Dad told me not to. I couldn't believe it. Dad knew? Yes. Why? Because he was afraid telling you would put you in danger. I felt a chill move through me. My father thought I was in danger? Michael nodded. He told me that if anything happened to him, I had to keep you away from the investigation. I looked down at my hands. Then why did you let me go to the warehouse? I didn't. You followed me. I followed you because I saw the key. I turned toward him. What do you mean? After the lawyer's office, I saw you put something in your pocket. The key. Yes. You followed me? I wanted to make sure you didn't open that warehouse alone. I stared at him. You could have just told me. Michael gave a bitter laugh. Would you have listened? I didn't answer. He was right. I probably wouldn't have. I looked through the windshield. There's still something you're not telling me. Michael went quiet. What? He stared at the dashboard. Dad suspected Daniel. My chest tightened. Of stealing the money? Not exactly. Then what? Michael took a long breath. He thought Daniel was helping someone. Who? I don't know. You just said that. Because it's the truth. He turned toward me. Dad didn't think Daniel was the person controlling everything. Then who was? Michael shook his head. Dad never found out. I remembered the final line in his notebook. Find Linda before they do. I pulled the notebook from my bag. Who is Linda Morris? Michael's expression changed immediately. Where did you see that name? In Dad's notes. He stared at me. Linda was the one who found the first irregular payments. Then why didn't she report them? She did. To Dad? Yes. Then what happened? Michael looked out the window. She disappeared. My heart sank. What do you mean, disappeared? She quit. When? About 8 months ago. Why? She said she was leaving for personal reasons. I stared at him. Did Dad believe that? No. I opened the notebook again. There was another note I hadn't noticed before. A date. A phone number. And beneath it. If Linda leaves, contact her at this number. I looked at Michael. I have her number. He shook his head. Don't call it. Why? Because if someone has been watching the company, that number may not be safe. I stared at the phone number. Then another thought hit me. Michael. What? How did you know the warehouse had been searched? He didn't answer. I turned toward him. You knew someone had been there before we arrived. Michael looked at me. I saw the lock. No. I shook my head. You knew too much. He looked away. Michael. Finally, he whispered. I wasn't the first person to find the warehouse. My blood went cold. Who was? He swallowed. Daniel. I couldn't breathe. Daniel came here? Yes. When? 3 weeks ago. I stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know what he was looking for. I felt anger rise inside me. You knew Daniel had been here and still let me walk into this place? I didn't know he had taken anything. How do you know he didn't? Michael reached into his jacket. He pulled out a photograph. He handed it to me. It showed the inside of the warehouse. Boxes had been opened. Files were scattered across the floor. And in the background stood Daniel. My own brother. He was holding a folder. I looked at the date printed in the corner. 3 weeks earlier. I turned the photograph over. There was a handwritten note on the back. Daniel came looking for the original contracts. I looked at Michael. Who wrote this? He didn't answer. I turned the photograph around again. Then I noticed something behind Daniel. A second person. The face was partially hidden by the doorway. I zoomed in on the photograph with my phone. My hand started shaking. I knew that person. It was someone I had seen that morning. Someone who had been sitting inside Mr. Harris's office. Someone who had listened while my father's secret was being revealed. I looked at Michael. Who is this? He stared at the photograph. Then his face went completely pale. That's impossible. Why? He didn't answer. I grabbed his arm. Michael, who is it? He finally whispered the name. Mr. Harris. I stared at him. The lawyer. My father's lawyer. The man who had given me the key. The man who had told me my father trusted me. The man who knew every secret in those files. I couldn't speak. Michael shook his head. No. What? Look again. I did. The photograph was blurry. The man in the background looked like Mr. Harris. But there was one difference. He wasn't wearing the suit he had worn that morning. And suddenly, I noticed something else. The photograph had been taken from inside the warehouse. Not from the doorway. Whoever took it had been standing close enough to hear the conversation. I looked at Michael. Who took this picture? He hesitated. I did. My heart stopped. You were there? I followed Daniel. Why? Because Dad asked me to. I felt completely lost. What exactly did Dad ask you to do? Michael looked at me. Watch Daniel. Why? Because Dad believed Daniel was going to make a move against the company. I looked down at the photograph again. Then I remembered something. That morning, when Mr. Harris handed me the key, he had said, "Someone else has been inside recently." He hadn't said he didn't know who. He had said we don't know yet. Maybe he had been telling the truth. Or maybe he had been lying. I looked at Michael. Where is the original photograph? He stared at me. I gave it to Dad. My heart dropped. Dad had it? Yes. Then how do you have this copy? Michael reached into his jacket again. This time, he pulled out a small envelope. Because Dad made copies of everything. I opened it. Inside was a single handwritten note. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. Rachel, if Michael has finally shown you this, then he has decided you deserve the truth. I stopped breathing. The next line was even worse. But there is one thing I never told either of you. I read the final sentence. The person behind the missing money is someone you have known your entire life. I looked at Michael. Neither of us spoke. Then my phone rang. The number on the screen was unknown. I answered. No one spoke. Then I heard a man's voice. Low. Calm. And terrifyingly familiar. Rachel. I froze. The voice continued. Stop looking for Linda. Then the call ended. I stared at my phone. Michael looked at me. Who was it? I couldn't answer. Because I knew that voice. And if I was right, the person who had just warned me wasn't a stranger. It was someone from my own family. I couldn't move. The phone was still pressed against my ear even though the call had ended. Michael was staring at me. Rachel. I slowly lowered the phone. He waited. Who was it? I looked at him. I know the voice. Who? I shook my head. I don't know. Michael frowned. You just said you knew it. I know it, but I can't place it. The truth was worse. The voice sounded familiar in a way that made my stomach hurt. Not because I had heard it recently. Because I had heard it for years. At family dinners. At business meetings. On Christmas mornings. In my father's office. I looked at Michael. Did you recognize it? He shook his head. No. I wasn't convinced. You'd been investigating this with Dad for 2 years. I would have recognized it. Would you? He didn't answer. I looked at the message log on my phone. The number was blocked. No name. No history. Nothing. Just the time of the call. 10:47 p.m. I looked at the warehouse clock. It was almost 11. We need to leave. Michael nodded. We got out of the car. But before I started the engine, I looked at the warehouse. The dark building stood behind us like it was hiding something. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only uncovered the beginning. Michael drove. I sat in the passenger seat with Dad's notebook on my lap. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked. What happened after Dad died? Michael tightened his grip on the steering wheel. What do you mean? You said Dad asked you to watch Daniel. Yes. Did you? Until Dad died. And then? Michael was silent. I stopped. Why? Because I thought Dad had been wrong. I turned toward him. Why? Daniel was angry after the funeral, but he didn't do anything suspicious. You just told me he went into the warehouse. That was before the funeral. I frowned. When? 3 weeks before Dad died. I looked at him. So Daniel was looking for something before Dad died. Yes. Did Dad know? I told him. What did he say? Michael hesitated. He said, let him look. I stared at him. Why would Dad say that? I don't know. I looked down at the notebook. Maybe Dad had known exactly what Daniel was searching for. Maybe he wanted him to find something. Or maybe he wanted him to believe he had found something. The thought made my head spin. I turned to another page. Most of the writing was financial information. But near the back, Dad had written several names. Daniel. Michael. Jason. Linda. And one other name. I stared at it. Robert Harris. I stopped breathing. Michael glanced at the page. What's wrong? I turned the notebook toward him. He looked at the name. His expression changed. That's the lawyer. I know. Why did Dad write his name? I don't know. I remembered the photograph. The figure who looked like Mr. Harris standing beside Daniel inside the warehouse. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was. But now his name was in Dad's private notebook. That couldn't be a coincidence. I closed the notebook. We need to go back to the lawyer. Michael shook his head. No. Why? Because if Dad suspected him, we shouldn't tell him what we found. I stared at Michael. Then what do we do? He thought for a moment. We find Linda. I remembered the warning. Stop looking for Linda. I shook my head. That call wasn't random. I know. Whoever called knew what I was doing. Michael nodded. Which means someone is watching us. The words made the inside of the car feel smaller. I looked behind us. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance. Then it disappeared. I turned around again. Nothing. Michael. What? That car. He looked in the rearview mirror. What about it? It was behind us when we left the warehouse. He slowed down. The headlights appeared again. Closer this time. Michael changed lanes. The car followed. My heart began racing. Do you know them? No. Are you sure? Yes. Michael turned onto a side street. The car turned too. Rachel, call the police. I reached for my phone. Then the other car suddenly accelerated. Michael stepped on the gas. The car behind us followed. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Michael made a sharp turn. The other car continued straight. We waited. It disappeared. Michael pulled into a gas station parking lot. We sat there in silence. Finally, he looked at me. We're not going home. I nodded. We spent the night at a hotel under Michael's name. I barely slept. Every sound outside the room woke me. Every time headlights passed the window, my heart jumped. At 6 in the morning, I finally gave up. Michael was sitting by the window. You didn't sleep either, I said. No. I sat across from him. We need to find Linda. He nodded. I opened Dad's notebook. The phone number was still there. Michael looked at it. Don't call. I'm not going to. I pulled out my laptop. Then what? Michael frowned. What are you doing? Searching for Westbridge Logistics. I typed the name. The company appeared in a state business database. Registered address. Formation date. Registered agent. Then I saw something strange. The company had been created only 3 months before the first suspicious payment. I opened the registration record. The registered agent was an attorney. Not Mr. Harris. Someone else. But the mailing address was familiar. I stared at the screen. Michael. What? This address. He came closer. What about it? I pointed. It was the address of a small office building where Carter Industrial Supply had once rented space. Dad had closed that office years ago. Or at least, I thought he had. Michael stared at the screen. That's impossible. Why? Because Dad sold that property. To whom? Michael didn't answer. I searched the property records. The current owner was listed as a company. Carter Property Management LLC. My stomach tightened. Who owns it? Michael leaned closer. Then he whispered. Daniel. I closed my eyes. Everything was beginning to connect. The fake supplier. The missing money. The warehouse. Daniel's visit. The old property. But one question remained. Why? Why would Daniel create fake companies and move money around? Was he stealing from Dad? Was someone paying him? Or was he protecting someone? I opened Dad's notebook again. There was a final entry beneath the name Robert Harris. If Daniel is involved, don't assume he is the mastermind. I stared at the sentence. Michael read it over my shoulder. Then who is? I shook my head. I don't know. Suddenly, I remembered the phone call. Stop looking for Linda. Whoever had called knew exactly what we were doing. I looked at Michael. We need to find Linda before they do. He nodded. We searched for her name. Nothing useful came up. Then I remembered something. Linda had a daughter. Emily. I had met her once at the company Christmas party. She had been in college. I searched social media. After several minutes, I found an account that appeared to belong to her. The profile hadn't been updated in months. But there was one recent photograph. A family picture. Linda was standing beside Emily. And behind them was a street sign. I zoomed in. Pine Hollow Road. Michael recognized it. That's outside the city. Do you know where? Yes. We drove there. The road was quiet. Trees lined both sides. After 20 minutes, we found a small white house. No cars in the driveway. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. Then I noticed the door wasn't completely closed. I pushed it open. Linda? No answer. We stepped inside. The house looked like someone had left in a hurry. A coffee cup sat on the kitchen counter. A coat hung by the door. A purse was on the floor. Michael looked at me. She was here. I nodded. Then I noticed something on the kitchen table. A photograph. It was Linda and Dad. They were standing together outside Carter Industrial Supply. On the back was a handwritten note. I turned it over. Thomas, if they find out I kept the copies, they will come after my daughter next. My heart sank. Copies, I whispered. Michael looked around the room. Copies of what? Before I could answer, we heard a noise upstairs. A floorboard creaked. Michael motioned for me to stay behind him. We slowly moved toward the staircase. Another sound. Then footsteps. Someone was coming down. A man appeared at the top of the stairs. He froze when he saw us. I recognized him immediately. It was Jason. My youngest brother. He looked just as shocked to see me. What are you doing here? I asked. He didn't answer. Michael stepped forward. Jason, where's Linda? Jason looked at both of us. Then he whispered. She's gone. I stared at him. Where? I don't know. Then why are you here? He looked toward the hallway. I came because she called me. My heart skipped. When? Last night. What did she say? Jason swallowed. She said she had proof. Proof of what? He looked at me. Proof that Daniel wasn't stealing the money. I felt the room tilt. What? Jason's voice dropped. He was covering it up. Michael stared at him. Covering up what? Jason looked terrified. Someone else was taking the money. Who? He opened his mouth. Then stopped. A car door slammed outside. Jason looked toward the window. His face went white. They found us. I turned toward the front door. Someone was walking toward the house. Slowly. Calmly. Then I saw the person through the glass. And I knew exactly who it was. Robert Harris. My father's lawyer. He stood outside the house holding a folder. Then he looked directly through the window at me. And smiled. Robert Harris stood outside the house. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't angry. He simply stood there with the folder in his hand, looking through the window at me. Then he raised his hand and knocked. 3 slow knocks. Nobody moved. Jason looked terrified. Michael stepped in front of me. Don't open the door. Mr. Harris knocked again. Rachel, he called through the glass. His voice sounded completely normal. Almost gentle. I know you're inside. I looked at Michael. How did he find us? Michael shook his head. I don't know. Jason whispered. He followed me. I turned toward him. You knew he was coming? No. Then why are you so scared? Jason didn't answer. Mr. Harris knocked again. Rachel, please. I stepped toward the door. Michael grabbed my arm. Don't. I stopped. Then Mr. Harris said something that made me freeze. Your father told me you would be afraid of me. I looked through the glass. What did you say? He knew you might eventually suspect me. Michael stared at me. Mr. Harris continued. But he also told me not to leave you alone with the evidence. My stomach tightened. What evidence? Mr. Harris lifted the folder. The evidence your father spent 2 years collecting. Michael whispered. He's bluffing. Mr. Harris looked directly at him through the glass. No, Michael. He paused. Your father told me everything. The room went silent. I looked at Michael. Then Jason. Then back at the man outside. Let him in, I said. Michael shook his head. Rachel. I want answers. I unlocked the door. Mr. Harris stepped inside. He looked at Jason first. Then Michael. Finally, he looked at me. You shouldn't have come here. I almost laughed. Everyone keeps telling me that. He didn't smile. This is not a game. I know. He held out the folder. Then you need to understand what you're dealing with. I didn't take it. First, you tell me why Dad wrote your name in his notebook. Mr. Harris looked down. I was expecting that question. Answer it. He took a breath. Your father suspected me. My heart dropped. Why? Because I helped him create Carter Family Holdings. I stared at him. That's it? No. He looked at Michael. Your father also asked me to investigate the financial transfers. Michael stepped forward. You were investigating him? Yes. Then why were you photographed with Daniel in the warehouse? Mr. Harris's expression changed. Because I wasn't with Daniel. I frowned. The photograph says otherwise. No. He took the photograph from my hand. He studied it. Then shook his head. That isn't me. I stared at him. It looks exactly like you. I know. He turned the photograph over. That's why your father kept it. What do you mean? Mr. Harris looked at me. Because someone wanted your father to believe I was involved. The room went quiet. Michael took the photograph. Who? Mr. Harris shook his head. We never found out. I felt a strange sense of frustration. Then what do you actually know? Mr. Harris opened the folder. Your father discovered that money was being moved through several shell companies. Westbridge Logistics. One of them. He handed me a document. The name of another company appeared. Pine Ridge Consulting. Then another. Mercer Equipment Services. Then another. Carter Property Management. I looked at Jason. He lowered his eyes. How many were there? 7, Mr. Harris said. 7 companies? 7 known companies. My stomach turned. And Daniel? Daniel knew about some of them. Did he create them? No. Did he steal the money? Mr. Harris hesitated. Not in the way you think. I looked at him. What does that mean? Daniel discovered the transfers. Michael stared at him. Then why didn't he tell Dad? Mr. Harris looked at Michael. Because he was afraid. Of what? Of the person who was behind them. I felt a chill. Who? Mr. Harris looked at Jason. Jason's face had gone pale. That's what Linda found out. I stepped closer. Where's Linda? Mr. Harris's expression became serious. I don't know. You're lying. No. You came to her house. I came because I received a message. From whom? He pulled out his phone. Linda. My heart jumped. When? 40 minutes ago. He showed me the message. It contained only one sentence. If Rachel comes here, give her the folder. I looked at the folder in his hand. What is inside? The original audit. My hands went cold. An audit? Your father commissioned it privately. Why didn't I know about it? Because he didn't want anyone to know. I took the folder. Inside was a thick financial report. Pages and pages of transactions. Names. Dates. Account numbers. Company registrations. At the bottom of the first page was Dad's signature. I read the summary. Then I stopped. The audit didn't say Daniel was the thief. It said something much worse. The unauthorized transfers originated from an internal account with administrative access. I looked at Mr. Harris. Who had administrative access? 4 people. Who? Your father. Me? No. I frowned. Then who? Daniel. Michael? No. Jason? No. Then who was the 4th? Mr. Harris looked at me. Linda. I stared at him. Linda had administrative access? Yes. My mind raced. Then she could have taken the money. She could have. But Dad trusted her. Very much. I turned to another page. There was a list of transfers. Next to each one was a notation. Authorized by system administrator. Then I saw something strange. The transfers occurred at times when Linda was not working. Some were made at 2 in the morning. Others on weekends. I looked at Mr. Harris. Then it wasn't Linda. No. Could someone have used her credentials? That's what your father believed. I turned to another page. There was a technical report. It showed the login locations. The same credentials had been used from 3 different locations. Carter Industrial Supply. The old Mercer Street office. And I stopped. My eyes moved to the final location. Carter Family Holdings. I felt my heart stop. That's impossible. Mr. Harris didn't speak. Michael came closer. What is it? I pointed. Someone accessed the system using credentials connected to my holding company. Jason looked confused. But the holding company wasn't active. Exactly. Mr. Harris nodded. Your father created it 3 months before his death. Then how could anyone have accessed it? Mr. Harris looked at me. That's the question your father never answered. I flipped through the audit. There were pages missing. I noticed immediately. Page 37. Page 38. Page 39. Gone. I looked at Mr. Harris. Where are the missing pages? I don't know. You're my father's lawyer. I know. You were supposed to protect these documents. I did. Then how are pages missing? Mr. Harris looked at Jason. Jason suddenly stepped backward. I noticed. Jason. He froze. Where are you going? I'm not. You're hiding something. No. Then why did you look at him? Jason looked at Mr. Harris. Then at me. His eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to tell you. Tell me what? Jason swallowed. Linda gave me the missing pages. The room went silent. Where are they? Jason looked down. I destroyed them. My heart dropped. Why? Because Daniel told me to. Michael grabbed Jason's arm. You knew? Jason pulled away. I didn't know what was happening. I stared at him. Then tell me everything. Jason started crying. Daniel told me the pages would destroy the family. What was on them? He shook his head. I don't remember everything. You destroyed them. I know. Then remember. He closed his eyes. Finally, he whispered. There was a name. What name? Jason looked at me. Someone who had access to everything. Who? He didn't answer. Mr. Harris suddenly looked toward the window. Wait. We all turned. A black SUV was parked across the street. Its engine was running. Mr. Harris's face changed. That's the same vehicle I saw near the warehouse. Michael moved toward the window. The SUV pulled away. I looked at Mr. Harris. Who was in it? He shook his head. I couldn't see. Then my phone buzzed. A message appeared. Unknown number. You should have listened to me. A second message followed. Your father made the same mistake. Then a third. He trusted the wrong person. I stared at the screen. Michael came closer. Who is it? I didn't answer. Because another message appeared. This one contained a photograph. It showed my father sitting in his office. Alive. Healthy. And sitting across from him was a person I recognized immediately. I looked at the photograph again. Then I felt the blood drain from my face. The photograph had been taken only 2 weeks before my father died. And the person sitting across from him was Linda Morris. But Linda wasn't alone. Someone was standing behind her. Someone whose face had been deliberately scratched out. At the bottom of the photograph was a message. Ask Linda why she really left. I looked at Mr. Harris. Where is Linda? He didn't answer. I looked at Jason. He looked away. Then Michael said quietly. I know where she might be. I turned toward him. Where? He looked at the photograph. There's an old property Dad used before he bought the Mercer Street warehouse. What property? Michael hesitated. The original Carter Industrial Supply building. My heart began pounding. The one Daniel owns? No. Michael shook his head. The one Dad never sold. I stared at him. You said he sold it. I was wrong. He looked at me. Rachel, Dad didn't sell that building. Then who owns it? Michael's voice dropped. Your father. I couldn't breathe. He was dead. Yet somehow, my father still owned a building nobody knew existed. And if Linda was hiding anywhere, I had a feeling Dad had left one final secret waiting for us there. By the time we reached the original Carter Industrial Supply building, the sun had already disappeared. The building sat at the end of a quiet industrial street. It looked abandoned. The sign above the entrance was almost completely faded. I had driven past this place hundreds of times when I was younger. Dad used to call it the old shop. I had never questioned what happened to it. I had simply believed what everyone told me. Dad sold it. But now Michael was telling me something different. He turned off the engine. Nobody comes here anymore. I looked at the building. How do you know? Because Dad made me promise. Promise what? Never come here unless he told me to. I looked at him. And did he? Michael shook his head. No. Then why are we here? He looked at me. Because he's dead. That answer broke my heart. Dad had spent years preparing for something none of us understood. And now we were following instructions he had never expected to explain while alive. I got out of the car. Jason followed. Mr. Harris stayed behind. I turned. Aren't you coming? He shook his head. No. Why? Because this is your father's property. I frowned. You came this far. I know. He looked toward the building. Your father specifically told me never to enter it. That made me stop. Why? Mr. Harris didn't answer. He simply said, "Be careful." Then he got back into his car. I watched him drive away. Michael looked at me. Do you trust him? No. Good. We walked toward the building. The main entrance was locked. Michael tried the handle. Nothing. Then I remembered the black key. I pulled it from my pocket. It fit. The door opened. Inside, the smell of old wood and dust filled the air. There were empty shelves along the walls. Old shipping labels. Broken equipment. A faded company calendar from 15 years ago. I walked slowly through the building. This was Dad's first warehouse. Michael nodded. Before Carter Industrial Supply became what it is today. I touched the old counter. I remember this. What? Dad used to let me sit here after school. Michael smiled faintly. You were always doing homework. I hated homework. You still complained about it. I smiled for half a second. Then the memory disappeared. Because I remembered why we were here. Where would Dad hide something? Michael looked around. He always used to say people search where they expect a secret to be. And? He said the safest place was somewhere nobody cared to look. Jason spoke from behind us. The office. We both turned. Jason pointed toward a hallway. Dad always kept the important stuff in the old office. We walked toward it. The door was locked. Michael searched the desk outside. Nothing. Jason checked a cabinet. Nothing. I looked at the wall. There was an old framed photograph. Dad was standing outside the building with a younger version of himself. I removed the photograph. Behind it was a small metal safe. My heart jumped. Michael. He came over. There was a keypad. I tried Dad's birthday. Nothing. Mom's birthday. Nothing. The date Carter Industrial Supply was founded. Nothing. Jason whispered. Try Rachel's birthday. I looked at him. Why? Because Dad used your name for everything. I entered the date. The safe opened. Inside was a single envelope. No money. No jewelry. No contracts. Just a letter. The envelope had my name on it. Rachel. I opened it. The first line made my eyes fill with tears. My little girl, if you found this, then I was right to worry. I sat down. Michael and Jason stood beside me. I continued reading. I know you are probably angry with me. You have every right to be. I kept too many things from you. But there were things I couldn't tell you without putting you in danger. I wiped my eyes. The next paragraph explained why. Your brothers are not the reason I separated the company assets. They are the reason I started investigating. But the investigation led somewhere I never expected. I held my breath. Someone inside our family has been helping an outside person move money through the company. Jason looked at me. Michael didn't move. I kept reading. I don't know which one of them is completely responsible. Daniel knows more than he admits. Michael knows more than he thinks he knows. Jason has been manipulated. Jason looked down. Then I reached the next paragraph. But none of them is the person you should fear most. My heart began pounding. I read the next line. That person is the one who has had access to my private records for years. I stopped. I looked at Michael. Who had access to Dad's private records? He shook his head. His lawyer. Jason whispered. Mr. Harris. I looked back at the letter. But the next line changed everything. Do not accuse Harris. I froze. What? Michael leaned closer. I read it aloud. Do not accuse Harris. He is not the person behind this. We looked at each other. Then I continued. The person I suspect has access to my records through someone I trusted. I turned the page. There was only one sentence. Ask Linda who helped her access the files. My heart sank. Linda. Again. Dad had trusted her. But someone had helped her. Someone with access to his private records. I looked at the envelope. There was something else inside. A small photograph. I pulled it out. It showed Dad standing beside a woman. Linda. But the photograph was older. Much older. They were standing outside the original building. On the back, Dad had written, "Linda knows where the first ledger is." I looked at Michael. "The first ledger?" He nodded slowly. Dad kept handwritten financial records before everything went digital. "Where?" "I don't know." Jason suddenly spoke. "I do." We both looked at him. He swallowed. "Daniel told me once." "Where is it?" Jason hesitated. "At Mom's house." My heart stopped. Mom's house? There's an old storage room in the basement. I remembered it. Mom had died years before Dad. The house had been mostly empty since then. But Dad had kept some belongings there. I stood. "We're going." Michael grabbed my arm. "Rachel, wait." "What?" "There's something else." He looked uncomfortable. Before Dad died, I saw Daniel go to Mom's house. When? The night before Dad went into the hospital. I stared at him. "Why?" "I don't know." "Did he take anything?" I couldn't see. I looked at Jason. "Did Daniel ever tell you what he was looking for?" Jason shook his head. "No." Then he suddenly remembered something. "Actually." I turned. "What?" "Daniel asked me if Dad ever gave you a key." I felt a chill. "The black key?" Jason nodded. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't think it mattered." I looked down at the key. Suddenly, everything made sense. Dad hadn't hidden the key from my brothers because it opened a warehouse. He had hidden it because the key represented something they were desperately trying to find. I put the letter into my bag. "Let's go." We reached Mom's old house shortly after midnight. The house looked exactly as I remembered it. White siding. Blue shutters. The porch where Mom used to sit during summer evenings. I stood there for a moment. Then I unlocked the door. Inside, everything smelled like dust and old memories. Mom's photographs were still on the walls. Her favorite chair was still in the living room. For a second, I forgot why we were there. Then Michael said quietly, "Basement." We went downstairs. The storage room was at the back. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Old Christmas decorations. Family photographs. Mom's clothes. Dad's old business files. Jason found the light switch. Nothing happened. Michael used his phone. We started searching. 20 minutes passed. Then another 10. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed something behind an old cabinet. A small wooden box. I pulled it out. Inside was a black ledger. My heart started racing. I opened it. The handwriting was Dad's. The first page contained years of financial records. The final pages were different. There were names. Dates. And one sentence repeated several times. "Do not trust the person who brings you this ledger." I stared at the words. What does that mean? Michael looked over my shoulder. Then Jason suddenly stepped backward. "What?" Jason pointed at the ledger. "That's not Dad's handwriting." I froze. "What?" Jason shook his head. "I've seen Dad's handwriting my whole life." He pointed to the final pages. These were written by someone else. I looked closer. He was right. The handwriting was different. The entries had been added later. Someone had written inside my father's ledger. Someone who knew exactly what he had been investigating. Then I found a name. Linda Morris. Underneath it was a date. And beside the date. Meeting, 11:30 p.m. The meeting was scheduled for the night before Dad died. My heart stopped. Linda met Dad that night. Michael nodded. Apparently. I turned the page. There was another name. Not Daniel. Not Michael. Not Jason. Not Mr. Harris. A name I hadn't expected to see. My mother's maiden name. Evelyn Parker. I looked at Jason. Who is Evelyn Parker? Jason stared at the page. I don't know. Michael shook his head. Neither do I. I turned to another page. There was a photograph tucked inside. It showed Dad. Linda. And a third person. The same person whose face had been scratched out in the photograph from Linda's house. But this photograph was clearer. I could finally see the face. I dropped the picture. Because the person standing beside my father was someone I had trusted for most of my life. Someone who had been at the funeral. Someone who had stood beside me while I cried. Someone who had told me they were sorry for my loss. And suddenly, I understood why Dad had written. Do not trust the person who brings you this ledger. Because the ledger had not been hidden for me to find. It had been hidden for someone else to find first. I looked at Michael. We need to leave. Why? Because someone knew we would come here. Before he could answer, the basement door slammed shut upstairs. We all froze. Then we heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming down the stairs. Jason whispered. Someone followed us. I grabbed the ledger. Michael moved in front of us. The footsteps stopped. Then a familiar voice came from the darkness above. Rachel. My blood ran cold. It was Daniel. But he wasn't alone. Another voice spoke behind him. And this time, I recognized it immediately. It was the voice from the phone. The voice that had warned me to stop looking for Linda. The voice that had told me my father trusted the wrong person. I looked at Michael. He was already staring at me. Then the lights suddenly came on. Daniel stood at the top of the stairs. And beside him was the person I had trusted most after my father died. I couldn't breathe. Robert Harris stood beside Daniel at the top of the basement stairs. My father's lawyer. The man who had handed me the black key. The man who had told me my father trusted me. The man who had spent hours explaining my father's final wishes. And now he was standing beside my brother in my mother's house at nearly 1 a.m. Michael moved in front of me. Stay back. Mr. Harris looked at him. Michael, please. I stared at the lawyer. You called me. He didn't answer. You were the voice on the phone. His silence was enough. My hands tightened around the ledger. You told me to stop looking for Linda. Mr. Harris finally nodded. Yes. Jason whispered. Why? Mr. Harris looked at all three of us. Because I was trying to protect you. I almost laughed. Protect me? Yes. By threatening me? I never threatened you. You told me my father made the same mistake. Mr. Harris looked down. I told you the truth. Daniel stepped forward. Rachel, you're making this worse than it is. I turned toward him. You brought him here. Daniel shook his head. No. I pointed at Mr. Harris. Then why is he standing beside you? Because we both came here for the same reason. What reason? Daniel looked at the ledger in my hand. That. My stomach tightened. The ledger? Give it to me. No. Rachel. No. Daniel took another step. Michael blocked him. Don't. Daniel looked at Michael. You still don't understand what you're involved in. Michael's expression hardened. Then explain it. Daniel laughed bitterly. You think I stole Dad's money? Did you? No. Then why were you in the warehouse? Because I was looking for evidence. Evidence of what? Daniel looked at Mr. Harris. The lawyer didn't speak. Daniel finally said. Evidence against the person who was stealing it. I stared at him. Then why did you hide it from me? Because Dad told me to. That stopped me. What? Daniel's voice cracked. Dad told me to keep you out of it. I shook my head. He wrote me letters. He wrote me one too. Daniel reached into his jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. My father's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. Daniel handed it to me. I opened it. Daniel, if Rachel ever finds the warehouse, does not fight her. Do not try to control what she finds. She will need to see the truth herself. I looked at Daniel. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid. Of what? He looked toward Mr. Harris. Of what would happen if the wrong person realized you knew. I turned toward the lawyer. Then why did you come here? Mr. Harris stepped down the stairs. Because your father asked me to. When? 3 days before he died. I stared at him. What did he ask you to do? Protect you. From whom? Mr. Harris didn't answer. Daniel did. From the person who had access to Dad's private records. I looked at the ledger. Then at the photograph. Then back at Mr. Harris. You knew. Mr. Harris nodded. Yes. Who is it? He looked at me. You're not ready. I felt anger explode inside me. Stop saying that. My voice echoed through the basement. My father is dead. My family is falling apart. Someone stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. Someone has been following me. Someone threatened me. And everyone keeps telling me I'm not ready. I stepped closer. I am done being protected. Nobody spoke. I held up the ledger. I want the truth. Mr. Harris closed his eyes. Then he said. Your father believed the person behind the money transfers was using Daniel as a shield. I looked at Daniel. What does that mean? Daniel was making suspicious transactions, Mr. Harris explained. But some of those transactions were designed to hide the real transfers. I frowned. So Daniel wasn't stealing. No. He was covering something up. Yes. Why? Daniel answered. Because I found out who was doing it. I stared at him. Who? He looked at me. Someone who had access to Dad's personal files, his business accounts, his legal documents. He paused. And your father's trust. My heart stopped. Who? Daniel's face tightened. Your mother. I stared at him. What? Mom. I shook my head. Mom died years before Dad. I know. Then stop. I'm not saying Mom was stealing money. Then what are you saying? Daniel pointed at the ledger. Look at the dates. I opened it. He pointed to one entry. This company was registered 12 years ago. I looked at the name. Westbridge Logistics. My eyes widened. That's the first company. Daniel nodded. And look at the owner. I searched the page. The owner was listed under a name I didn't recognize. But beneath it was an old address. My mother's house. I looked at Daniel. That doesn't prove anything. No. He pointed to another page. Now look at this. Another company. Pine Ridge Consulting. Same address. Then another. Mercer Equipment Services. Same address. 3 shell companies. All connected to the house where Mom had lived. My mind raced. Who had access to that house after Mom died? Daniel looked at me. Dad. And? Me. Michael? No. Jason? No. I looked toward Mr. Harris. Did you? He nodded. Sometimes. I stared at him. Then any of you could have done it. Not me, Mr. Harris said. How do you know? Because I was never authorized by your father's company banking system. I looked at Daniel. And you? I had access. Michael? No. Jason? No. I looked down at the ledger. Then I remembered something. The photograph. The person standing behind Linda. The face had been scratched out. I pulled it from my bag. I held it beside the ledger. Who is this? Nobody answered. I looked closer. The person was wearing a watch. A silver watch with a dark rectangular face. I had seen that watch before. Many times. My heart started pounding. I looked at Mr. Harris's wrist. He wasn't wearing it. Daniel wasn't wearing it. Michael wasn't wearing one. Jason wasn't either. Then I remembered. My father had owned the same watch. He had given it to someone. After his death. I suddenly knew who. I turned toward Daniel. Where is your watch? Daniel looked confused. What? The watch Dad gave you. He looked at his wrist. Then at me. I don't have it. Where is it? I lost it. When? Months ago. I stared at him. Did Dad give you a silver watch? Daniel hesitated. Yes. Did he give anyone else one? He shook his head. No. I looked at the photograph again. The watch on the person's wrist was identical. My heart sank. But then Daniel said something that made me stop. Rachel, that's not my watch. I looked at him. What? The one Dad gave me had a brown leather strap. I looked at the photograph. The strap was black. Daniel stepped closer. That's why Dad scratched out the face. Why? Because he didn't know who it was. I felt a chill. Then Mr. Harris spoke. Your father eventually figured it out. I looked at him. Who? He looked at me. You. I froze. What? Your father believed someone had been using your identity. I couldn't speak. Mr. Harris continued. The holding company wasn't created only to protect the assets. Then why? Because your father needed a legal identity that nobody would suspect. I shook my head. Mine? Yes. Why would someone use my identity? Because you were the one person nobody thought would be involved. My mind went blank. Then I remembered the login records. The access connected to Carter Family Holdings. The company was created in my name. The suspicious transactions. My father's private records. Someone had been using my name. I looked at Daniel. Did you know? He nodded. I suspected. How long? Since Dad died. I felt betrayed. You knew someone was using my identity and didn't tell me? I was trying to find out who. With Mr. Harris? Yes. I looked at the lawyer. Then why did you let me believe my brothers had simply taken the company? Because your father wanted the transfer to happen. Why? Because he needed them to believe they had one. I stared at him. Why would he do that? Mr. Harris's expression became grave. Because your father believed the person behind everything would only reveal themselves if they thought the family had lost control. I looked at the ledger. Suddenly, the inheritance wasn't looking like an inheritance anymore. It was bait. My father had deliberately allowed my brothers to take control of the company. He had placed certain assets in my name. He had hidden evidence in multiple locations. And he had waited until after his death for the truth to begin unfolding. But there was still one question. Where is Linda? Mr. Harris looked at Daniel. Daniel looked away. I stepped closer. Where is she? Daniel finally answered. She's alive. My heart jumped. Where? We don't know. Then how do you know she's alive? Because she contacted me yesterday. Yesterday? He nodded. What did she say? Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He showed me a message. I found the original records. The person you're looking for isn't who Dad thought. I read it twice. Then another message appeared. Tell Rachel not to trust anyone. I looked up. When did she send this? Yesterday morning. Why didn't you tell me? Because 10 minutes later, she sent another message. He showed me. They know. I'm leaving. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Who are they? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. Then my phone buzzed. Another unknown number. One message. Now you know why your father chose you. A second message appeared. But you still don't know what he left you. I stared at the screen. Then a third message appeared. Go back to the warehouse. Open the room behind the second wall. I looked at Michael. He looked terrified. What room? I showed him the message. He immediately shook his head. Rachel, no. Why? Because there is no room behind the second wall. I looked at him. How do you know? Michael swallowed. Because Dad showed it to me once. I stared at him. What was inside? He looked at the ledger. Everything he was afraid to lose. I turned toward the stairs. Daniel stepped forward. Rachel. I stopped. Don't go alone. I looked at him. Are you coming? He nodded. Michael followed. Jason hesitated. Then he came too. Even Mr. Harris followed us. For the first time since Dad died, all four of us were moving in the same direction. Toward the truth. And none of us knew that when we opened that hidden room, we would finally discover why my father had divided his entire business the way he did. And why the person who had been stealing from him had been waiting for me to find it. We returned to the Mercer Street warehouse just before sunrise. Nobody spoke during the drive. Daniel sat in the passenger seat. Michael drove. Jason sat in the back. Mr. Harris followed us in his car. I kept Dad's ledger against my chest. For the first time, I understood that it wasn't just a book. It was the trail my father had left behind. A trail he expected me to follow. When we reached the warehouse, Michael unlocked the main door. We stepped inside. The building was still dark. Michael turned on the lights. This time, every bulb came on. I looked toward the back wall. Where is the second wall? Michael walked toward a row of shelves. He moved several boxes. Then he pointed. There. At first, I saw nothing. Just another section of brick wall. Michael ran his hand across it. Then he pressed a small metal plate. Click. A section of the wall moved. My heart stopped. Behind it was a narrow doorway. Daniel stared. I never knew this existed. Michael looked at him. Dad didn't want you to. I stepped inside. The room was smaller than I expected. There were no windows. No furniture. Just shelves. And on those shelves were boxes. Dozens of them. Every box had a date. Some were more than 20 years old. Others were from the last year of Dad's life. I picked up the nearest one. Carter Industrial Supply, original records. Another. Customer contracts. Another. Banking documents. Then I saw one with my name. Rachel, open last. My hands began shaking. I looked at Mr. Harris. Did you know about this? He nodded. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Your father instructed me not to. I opened the box. Inside were copies of contracts, legal documents, account records, and photographs. At the very bottom was another envelope. I knew before I opened it that it was from Dad. I unfolded the letter. Rachel. If you are reading this, then the plan worked. I stopped. My eyes filled with tears. The plan. My father had called all of this a plan. I kept reading. Your brothers were never supposed to inherit the entire business. But I needed them to believe they had. I looked at Daniel. He lowered his head. The letter continued. I know this sounds cruel. It wasn't meant to punish them. It was meant to expose the person who had been hiding behind them. My heart pounded. For years, someone has been using company accounts to move money. I initially believed one of your brothers was responsible. I was wrong. I looked at Michael. Then Daniel. Then Jason. All three were silent. Daniel discovered the transfers and tried to hide the investigation because he was afraid. Michael helped me track the money. Jason was manipulated by people he trusted. Jason wiped his eyes. Then I reached the sentence that changed everything. But the person who made the transfers was not one of my sons. I stopped. Daniel closed his eyes. Michael whispered. Keep reading. I did. The person behind the transfers had access to my personal records because someone close to me gave them that access. My hands shook. That person was Linda Morris. I looked up. Jason gasped. Daniel didn't move. I read the next paragraph. Linda did not steal the money herself. She was being blackmailed. My heart sank. Someone threatened her daughter. They forced her to provide access credentials and private records. I thought about the note at Linda's house. If they find out I kept the copies, they will come after my daughter next. Everything suddenly made sense. Linda had been trapped. But Dad had kept investigating. Linda eventually discovered who was behind the operation. I held my breath. She came to me the night before I went to the hospital. I remembered the photograph. Linda sitting across from Dad. She gave me the name. I turned the page. There was only one sentence. The person controlling everything was someone I had trusted for more than 20 years. I felt my chest tighten. Then the next page was missing. I looked at Mr. Harris. Where is it? I don't know. I looked at Daniel. Who took it? He shook his head. We never found out. I searched through the box. There was another envelope. This one was sealed. I opened it. Inside was a copy of an email. The sender was Linda. The recipient was Dad. The subject line read, I know who it is. I read the email. Thomas. I was wrong to wait this long. I was scared. They threatened Emily, and I believed them. But I can't keep doing this. My hands trembled. The person you are looking for has access to everything because you trusted them completely. They know your finances, your legal documents, your passwords, your contracts, and your family. I swallowed. They have been moving money for years. But the money isn't the real goal. I stared at the sentence. What could be more important than hundreds of thousands of dollars? I read the next line. They want control of Carter Industrial Supply. I looked at Daniel. The company. That was the real target. But why? Then I saw the final paragraph. They are planning to force you out before you die. Once you're gone, they intend to take the business through your sons. I looked at my brothers. Daniel whispered. That's what Dad suspected. I continued. Thomas, please don't confront them yet. If they know we understand what they're doing, they will destroy the evidence. The final line was short. Trust Rachel. I stopped. My father's handwriting appeared beneath the email. I will. Tears filled my eyes. For the first time, I understood. Dad hadn't chosen me because I was the favorite. He chose me because I was the only one he believed wouldn't let the business become a weapon. But there was still something I couldn't understand. If Linda knew who it was, why didn't she tell Dad the name? Mr. Harris answered quietly. She did. I turned toward him. Where? In the missing page. I felt frustrated. Then who took it? Nobody answered. I looked through the box again. At the bottom was a small digital recorder. I picked it up. There was one audio file. Dated the night before Dad went to the hospital. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. His voice sounded tired. Weak. But clear. Linda, you need to leave. A woman's voice answered. I can't. You can. They know about Emily. I'll protect her. You can't. There was silence. Then Dad spoke again. Tell me who it is. Linda started crying. I can't say the name. You have to. They're listening. Dad's voice became quiet. Then write it down. Another silence. Then Linda whispered. I wrote it. Dad asked. Where? In the ledger. I looked down at the black ledger in my hands. My heart started pounding. Dad continued. Rachel will find it. Linda said. How can you be sure? Dad answered. Because I know my daughter. The recording ended. Nobody spoke. I slowly opened the ledger again. The final pages. The handwriting that Jason had said wasn't Dad's. I looked closer. There were several letters written beneath the financial entries. At first, they didn't make sense. Then I realized what I was seeing. They weren't financial notes. They were initials. I wrote them down. L. M. R. D. I looked at Michael. What does this mean? He shook his head. Daniel took the ledger. He studied the page. Then he froze. Rachel. What? He pointed to the initials. They're not initials. Then what are they? A code. I stared at him. How do you know? Because Dad used this system for sensitive information. Daniel took a pen. He wrote the initials in a different order. Then another. Then he stopped. His face went white. What? He looked at me. The name isn't in the ledger. Then where? He turned the page. There was a small notation at the bottom. Use the first letters of the names on page 12. We opened page 12. There were 4 names. Daniel Carter. Michael Carter. Jason Carter. Rachel Carter. I stared at them. The first letters were D. M. J. R. Daniel shook his head. Not those. He turned the page. There was another list. Employees. Suppliers. Attorneys. And one name appeared at the top. Robert Harris. I looked at the lawyer. He was completely still. Daniel whispered. That's not possible. I looked at Mr. Harris. Why? He didn't answer. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His face changed. He answered. Hello? Nobody else could hear the voice. But I could see Mr. Harris becoming more frightened with every second. Finally, he said. Yes. Then he hung up. I stepped closer. Who was that? He looked at me. Linda. My heart stopped. She's alive? He nodded. Where is she? Mr. Harris looked at Daniel. Then Michael. Then Jason. Finally, he looked at me. She wants to meet you. Where? He handed me a piece of paper. There was an address. I recognized it immediately. It was the place where Dad and I had spent countless Saturday mornings when I was a child. His original office. The first place Carter Industrial Supply had ever operated. I looked at the address. Why there? Mr. Harris's voice was barely above a whisper. Because Linda says she finally has the missing page. My heart began pounding. The page with the name? He nodded. Yes. I looked at my brothers. For the first time, none of us argued. We all knew what that meant. The final piece of my father's investigation was still alive. And somewhere inside that old office was the name of the person who had betrayed my father. I closed the ledger. Then I heard a soft vibration. My phone. Another message. Unknown number. I opened it. There was only one sentence. Don't let Linda tell Rachel the truth. I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. Because if she does, the family you have left will never be the same. I looked up. Michael was watching me. What did it say? I slowly put the phone down. Someone knows we're going to meet Linda. Daniel's face hardened. Then we don't have much time. I looked at the address. For years, I had believed my father's greatest mistake was leaving his business to my brothers. Now I understand. That wasn't his mistake. His mistake was trusting the wrong person for 20 years. And in a few hours, I was finally going to learn who that person was.